a general surgery resident from UC Irvine. I'm in my, I guess technically sixth year now. After 3 years of clinical, 3 years, I'm in my third year of research, and then I'll be going back to the grind this summer. I went to UCI for undergrad and also medical school, so I'm an anteater for life. But did a couple stops at Pittsburgh and Northwestern as well to get my master's. So shout out to Chicago, Pittsburgh, and the OC.
Hi, everyone. My name is June. I'm a second year resident at University of Cincinnati College of Medicine. So I saw some people were from Ohio, so go Ohioans. I'm doing my diagnostic radiology residency right now, which is a total of a 5-year program. So I'm about sort of halfway through now. I did my undergrad over at Case Western and studied biomedical engineering there, and then did a couple gap years between medical scribing and doing research over at WashU in St. Louis. Before I settled for medical school at Cincinnati as well. So kind of not as diverse of an experience as probably Bima nationwide, but had a lot of really great experiences before I was able to join residency.
Awesome. June, did you have a preference of who goes first or?
No, you can go for it, man.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, so I guess the whole point of this is June and I and you guys are probably going to get into med school in different ways, and unfortunately there's no right way, but at some point our applications were able to pique someone's interest. So so the blueprint for standing out might seem a little bit daunting, but and it's not just a collection of the awards that you get or achievements or your GPA or MCAT score. A really good application has one nice cohesive story, a common thread that someone kind of goes through in their involvements and their life stories and how they have affected them that have led them into wanting to help people in this way. So admissions committees can really identify that in a person, and really there's no right way of doing things. And if I guess we didn't really know who or what stage you guys are all at, but hopefully you guys are in your freshman sophomore year where you're like a undifferentiated pluripotent stem cell at this point. At your stage, don't be afraid to just dive deep into whatever your passions may be. So if you're in your sophomore, senior year, getting ready to send in your applications, don't be afraid to hide some of the things that you're passionate about or some of the involvements that you may be in. Like, I've seen a personal statement describe how to fold a burrito, and it was like one of the best personal statements I've seen, or how they studied in McDonald's and how they made parallels to how the people that they interacted with during their studies have impacted them and led them to a career in medicine. So if you're in that stage getting ready to send in your apps, don't be afraid to kind of hide some of the non-science-y things.
Yeah, absolutely. And this slide is kind of just reiterating home that point. I think a lot of people, when they apply into medical school, they kind of think to themselves, hey, I'm not that diverse. I'm kind of run the mill. I certainly had that thought when I was applying to medical school, and also into even undergrad. I thought to myself, hey, I'm just like any other Asian guy on the block. I do math, I play cello, I play tennis. But it's really when you dive into who you are as an individual, I truly think that everyone has truly unique experiences and a unique journey of what led them to their point. And I think the biggest part of what stands out to someone who reads your application isn't necessarily hey, how many unique experiences has this person have, but like, how hard has this individual tried in their experiences? How well-rounded are they? How self-reflective are they on the experiences they've had? Because people can have the same experiences but have different takeaways from it, and those takeaways that you have and how you reflect on them is how you truly build your story. I think just as equally important as experiences that say that you want to do medicine are experiences that also say that you didn't want to do anything else. So it's about crafting your narrative and filling in all those gaps, and not really neglecting any part of your journey, and just making part of that of who you are and reflecting that in your application. It's incredibly hard to do sometimes, and that's where sometimes having an admissions counselor can help, but also having friends and family review your applications and just thinking things through with them. A lot of tools out in the world right now to sort of help you craft that type of journey and help you think about that journey you've had.
Nice. Yeah, I won't ramble on as much as I did in the first slide, but these points are likely a little bit more straightforward. So don't overlook the key details. It's tough to get and to put yourself out there to get letters of recommendations in the first place, and you might see it as kind of a checkbox, but make sure your letters of recommendations are strong. If you really vibe with a teacher, try to ask them a couple of weeks at max after the quarter or the semester ends, and don't be afraid to ask them blatantly, hey, Professor so-and-so, do you think you feel comfortable writing me a strong letter of recommendations? So yeah, don't feel shy to leave that out. Yeah, just be straightforward and ask them if they can give you a strong one. And then the secondary applications, it might feel like it is a money grab sometimes, because sometimes once you send in your primary applications, the secondary applications instantly come in, so it doesn't feel like they reviewed your primary applications at all. A lot of the times, unfortunately, it is a money grab, but that doesn't mean that you should slack off on the efforts that you put into these secondary applications. I've read secondary applications with the wrong schools identified in the applications, and that's a big no-no if you're copy and pasting, which you shouldn't be doing anyway. So try to make it, this is your chance to kind of like make it more personalized into the audience that you're writing to.
Other no-nos to keep in mind, essays that sound too rehearsed. There's obviously a lot of templates out there and a lot of examples that people have. And I think sometimes we get stuck in the idea of, hey, if this has worked before other people, maybe it'll work for me. I will say that there's a lot of overused phrases or exaggerated claims that people make that admissions counselors know how to spot immediately. I mean, they go through hundreds of applications a year. So, and I think also with the advent of AI and ChatGPT, I think people are coming a little bit more into practice of, hey, let's try and make things a little bit easier, just plug in that prompt and see what I get, and then kind of tailor my own experiences to it. Be very careful about it. I think ChatGPT is a great, especially as a radiologist. I know that AI has its benefits. I think it's key to use it as a helper, but not as your main source of inspiration. It's great if you stumbled into a writing block and you really don't know how to get the next sentence out, but your voice should always be your own voice. And these application readers really know how to interpret that type of voice and when you are just copying or just imitating someone else. I think another point is focusing solely on academics. This kind of goes back to our prior slides. Your journey is more than just academics. Obviously, I'm sure all of you are equally academically strong. There's a reason why you're applying to medical school, and you know that being a doctor is an incredibly challenging venture from a knowledge and mental standpoint. But it's also important that you recognize that doctors are also humans. We have our own interests outside of just our academia. I know plenty of my co-residents and co-medical students who play basketball or baseball, and it's just those sports or watching or playing or doing things like trivia together. it's just good to know that you're a person as well. And these people who are accepting you to medical school as well, they want a person. They don't want just someone who's able to tell them fact A and fact B. So on your application, it's really important, and this will help you become more diverse on paper as well. It's important to focus not only on just, hey, I got good grades, but also, hey, I really enjoy going out on Friday nights with the guys and playing trivia, you know? So it's just a great way to show that you're a well-balanced candidate.
Nice. Yeah, ditto, definitely ditto what June said. One thing about ChatGPT is that it can hallucinate. And so it might insert facts in there that you may not have necessarily been involved in. And so you don't want to be caught kind of in an interview, essentially, when someone asks you something about your personal statement that you had nothing to do with. So yeah, be very, very careful. The red flags, probably less so if you guys are already thinking medicine. I'm sure you guys have your volunteer hours and your clinical experience, but in terms of the set number, no one really knows. But what I tell my mentees is try to aim for 500. The reason being is because to be a physician assistant, they require you at least 2,000. And so I know that a lot of volunteer experiences through hospitals give a cap of 250. And so at least if you at least double that, it shows that you've gone out of your way and have been proactive to get more than that or take up leadership positions within those roles. I don't know, June, do you have another number or rule of thumb that you tell your mentees?
You know, it's kind of been similar for me as well. There really is no set number. And I think I've heard the number 500 before, and also 1,000. I think in terms of like shadowing experiences, I've also seen people walk in with 100 or 200 hours and they do perfectly fine. So there really is no set number. I think it's also just, it's just making sure that you show that you have a clinical passion. I think that's the most important thing. So it's not necessarily the number of experiences you have, but sometimes also how longitudinally you've done that experience can also show a lot. But it's like you said, Bima, it's kind of variable per person.
Gotcha. Nice. And yeah, try to be as organized as you can with your application materials. It can get really hairy really fast since every school after the primary will have their own set materials that they want to see. And in terms of career goals, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing if you want to pursue this field to help people, but just have an answer, or that you like the sciences, but just have an answer for why specifically medicine, because you can help people in so many other ways, working at a department store, etc. So and just have those answers ready.
So I saw someone raise their hand. Are we doing the Q&A at the end of the PowerPoint? I just want to make sure before I move forwards.
Yeah, absolutely. We can get to the questions in the end.
Okay, sounds great. So yeah, so just moving on, and just to make sure I'm not ignoring any of your guys' questions and statements. You guys all have very good questions. I just want to make sure that we get through the PowerPoint first, just before we answer those questions, and so we can spend enough time on them. So with regards to strengthening your narrative, so I think to the people who are, I think this might be a little bit more applicable to the people who are still building their application and trying to go through their experiences earlier on. I would say whatever experience you do, try to jot down notes about the experience while you're doing it, or at the end of the experience about, hey, like, what did I learn from this experience? Were there any really good character development experiences I had? Was there any moments where I feel like I made a difference? And it doesn't matter how small it was. It could even be like this team building exercise you did. Having those little pearls in each experience will make writing your application later on so much easier. It's always a struggle when you're like 3 years off from an experience and you're trying to recollect, oh, what did I do during this? Especially when you expand on that in your application, it becomes harder to do. So having those pearls during the experiences or right after the experiences is really was helpful for me to keep in the journal. Otherwise, I think it's important as you create your journey, everything should kind of point towards your journey towards medicine. It should point towards, hey, I did this teaching job and I realized that teaching was really important to me. And I realized that teaching is an important job of being a doctor as well, or an important part of being a doctor. And, it's just, you just find a way for each of your experiences to connect to your journey. And as you do that, it'll kind of just unfold on itself when you do the application. Outside of that, yeah, emphasizing the tangible outcomes of your actions is very important. Sometimes the sheer number of hours can help boost your application in a great way, but also the contributions you made from a research standpoint in terms of what type of posters have you presented at, what type of papers have you published. That's all great academic currency, and that currency is what is kind of universal. Like a published paper is a published paper, and that's going to have a lot of weight moving forwards. And it speaks much stronger to than just hey, I just did a month of research and that's all I really have to show for it. So I really do encourage that in whatever experience you're in, just don't feel afraid to just delve right in and just try to go as deep as possible, especially in research. Ask your PIs, hey, I really want to do a poster presentation, or I really want to do a paper. Are there any projects you could place me on that kind of lightens me up on that goal? I'm happy to work hard, and I am a hard worker, so I would love to get that type of opportunity. And usually people in academics really respond positively to that. So I really recommend just putting your foot forward in whatever experience you do.
Alrighty. And then, yeah, kind of like what we had mentioned before, treating your application like a puzzle. I would say that it might be easy to recycle some of these experiences, but to make your application as efficient as possible, try to focus your personal statement and write something on a topic that you can't talk about elsewhere. So for example, in your experiences, that should talk about the sheer number of hours you have and what you learn from those experiences. And you get a chance to, out of the 12 or 15, you get a chance to focus on 3 big ones that have been more impactful. So when I counsel mentees, if you do decide to expand on the 3 experiences that you decide to expand on, don't write the same thing for your personal statement. That gives you more flexibility to write your personal statement on something else. That way you cover more ground in your life, and the admission committees get to know you better. Yeah, the letters of recommendation are a little straightforward. They'll talk, the teachers will kind of, talk to the admission committees about how you are in a class setting. And yeah, all the experiences that you have will tie in some way into your goals of becoming a physician. So just make sure that you highlight those things. You might be muted, June.
Can you hear me? Sorry about that. Thanks for pointing it out. Yeah, so other tips. So tailor your application to essentially reflect each medical school you're applying to. That's really, really, really important. That's probably the most, actually second most important thing, first or second most important thing in your secondary applications, where it's not about connecting your experiences to that school, but also just really showing that you did your research in that school. Like we said earlier, schools know just when you're just rinsing and repeating applications. It's even if you just change the name of the school, it's very easy to tell that this is just kind of a stock secondary application essay that you're sending out to multiple schools. Schools love it when you show that you've done your research into each school about specific opportunities they have, about specific programs they have. I would talk about specific research programs I would love to join at, like, for example, like NYU. They have this great bioacoustics lab that I wanted to join. And I would talk about that in part of my secondary application. There was also, like, if you had like interest in free clinics, a lot of schools have free clinics, and you can specifically name like the specific free clinic they have because they each have their own name, and that just shows a great level of attention of detail that you have, and the schools really do appreciate that. That really does count a lot to them. Clear and compelling language is especially important. I think we tend to be a little bit verbose when we talk a little bit ourselves. I think it's more important to have focused language. Get to the point of what you're trying to say. Use strong verbs and strong adjectives that get your message across effectively, and strong action words. Highlighting unique qualities or experiences. Again, we've sort of hashed this part out, but even the experiences that you don't count as unique, you can make it unique. Even though I did medical scribing, and a lot of people do medical scribing, I don't just say it as a, hey, I did medical scribing for X, Y, and Z at this hospital. I say I did medical scribing for this particular department, and in this department, it was great to experience specific patient populations that had this and this disease. It was great to connect with the families and the patients, and it was great to see how the doctors work specifically with each of this hard patient population. Adding those little details about what diseases patients had, even like that, just makes that experience more unique, because it shows that you really did care about that experience. And that's why I'm saying every experience can be turned into something unique. And then seeking feedback from trusted mentors or professionals is obviously very important. It's always just good to get a third person point of view. And that's, again, where application counselors can help. But even if you can't do that, then friends and families in your school also has counselors that can help you as well.
So the evaluation process. So academics definitely count. I know that we're focusing more on kind of like your life story, but don't forget about your GPA and MCAT scores. Every school, unfortunately, will have some type of filtering experience or some filtering preference that they use. And it's kind of a black box and hard to tell, but if you're above a 3.7 GPA and I guess the MCAT score has changed by now, but like above a 510 at the very least, you should be crossing fingers okay, but getting into med school is kind of a crapshoot sometimes. There's a nice resource that I refer my mentees to called the Lizzie M score. It's through StudentDoctor.net. I hate that website and it gives me a lot of anxiety still, even looking at it I feel the anxiety for my mentees, but I'll link it here. That's probably one of the only tools that I use from that website. Personal attributes we mentioned already, and alignment with school values. So that is the purpose of the secondary applications. I think someone had a question on that in the chat, but this is your way to kind of align with what the school focuses on. So not all schools are going to be interested in research, for example. Some schools are going to be more interested in serving the underserved or serving a community partner, etc. But some schools will want you to take a year or a couple months dedicated to be in a research lab and be involved in other academic work. So make sure that when you decide to apply to that school, if you want to be in that type of environment. I know some folks don't like research but love the patient care, which is awesome, and some people really like the research, and someone like me who keeps on delaying residency graduation just to do more research years. So it all depends on what you want, and I'm sure there are going to be aspects of schools that will align with your values, and so just make sure that you highlight those in your secondaries.
Sweet. I think, did we skip a slide? I'm sorry. I guess my PowerPoint might be different. That's fine. So I'll move on to the next slide. There we go. Perfecting your personal statement. So highlighting your motivation. So in terms of, there's your personal statement, there's a primary application, there's your secondary application. So we review the secondary application. That's your tie-in with each specific school and your chance to kind of elaborate how you align with the school's missions. There's the primary application where you get to talk about your experiences in general, and these get sent out to all the schools kind of universally. And then the personal statement, of course, is the thing that most application, or at least in my experience, most admissions, one of the documents that they first read, and that this talks about your inspiration about why you want to be a doctor. I'm sure people who are getting ready to apply have already started thinking about what to put in their personal statement. And if you haven't had a chance to really think about it, it can be a daunting task because this is a full-page essay, and you really want to make sure that it's. I think a lot of people sometimes try to make it a little bit harder on themselves and try to be too creative. And because we see all these really good examples of personal statements online. But I think my general rule of thumb with personal statements is creativity is fine, but you just want to make sure it answers the question first and foremost of why you want to be a doctor. And I think that's where all this work you've put into just tailoring your experiences to medicine, all that kind of stuff, you'll kind of see in your experiences what has been key things for you on your journey on convincing you to be a doctor. And then you just take the reader into that logical journey of what led you to medicine. You can add creative examples and metaphors to make that writing a little bit easier to read. But for the most part, it's all about just making sure you put your key experiences and how this links to your final commitment to medicine. Showcasing your unique qualities. In general, I think a lot of the personal statements have similar qualities in some sense of like, oh, I love patient care. I love clinical experiences. So I think as long as you're really just emphasizing that, as long as you're answering the question adequately that you do want to be a doctor, I think that's the most important thing for me. I see a lot of really different personal statements. So as long as it answers that question, that's the most important thing. With that being said, I think the biggest thing for personal statement and making sure you write a successful personal statement is having multiple ideas and then releasing these multiple ideas to your peers. Your family, your friends, your mentors, your counselors, and seeing which one they think would work the best, and getting feedback from them. So my personal statement when I was writing, and this is what I tell my mentees too, I usually got revised about, I think I got revised about 15 times before I was finally happy with a personal statement. And it's something that I spent a lot of time adequately writing. And this is another example of don't use ChatGPT and think to yourself like, oh, the writing sounds good, that's all I need. And there's more to it than
that. Let's see. So tailoring your application to each school. I think we pretty much covered this. So yeah, understand the program's priorities, provide specific examples that show why you're strong a fit for that school. If you're still pretty far or in the beginning of your clinical journey or your pre-med journey, during your clinical experiences, try to keep a journal of like interesting things that you run into, because those will really help you later on when you make these essays. I wasn't someone that did that, and it was so inefficient for me to think of those experiences. So try to keep a log of all the interesting things that you've seen, and it'll come so much more easier once you're at this stage. And then, yeah, connect to the school's focus area. This will all be kind of borne out in their website and different forums where the school kind of advertises. So this will all play a role in your secondary applications.
And Bima, I'm just going to make a quick interjection here as well. Even though some schools are more research focused or more community service focused, whenever a school accepts applications and fills up their medical student body, they focus on creating a diverse student body. So it's not going to be 100% of a, hey, like if I want 100% of people who do just research. Like they usually try to fill up people who do research, people who also volunteer a lot and do a lot of clinical experiences. I'm almost mostly research focused as well. So I kind of fit in that boat of, hey, I love to do research, but a lot of my peers in medicine had done very, very little research. And this is I went to a top 25 or top 30 med school as well. So it's like, it is academic. But at the same time, I had plenty of peers who was focused more into community service, and that's what all their experiences were. So it just goes to show that everyone has their own journey. It's just about how you emphasize why you want to do medicine. So just keep that in mind. If you don't have that much research, that's not a killer in an application. But you should at least show for that lack with other experiences that you did too, clinically. Yeah.
So we have a couple more slides left before the Q&A, but I'd love to do just a really quick check-in with everyone. Maybe we can answer a question or two here because there's absolutely some really amazing discussions happening in the chat right now. And just before that, I want to just draw your attention to the screen just for being with us tonight. And if you're interested in any of our programs, or even if you're looking to learn a little bit more about who we are, or if you have additional questions about your own application, we recommend you book that free consultation. You just pull out your phone, scan that QR code, it'll take you back to a page, and you'll really be able to sit down with one of my amazing colleagues, admissions counselors, admission experts, who will be able to answer any questions that we may not be able to answer tonight. So I just want to take a quick moment to draw your attention to that. In terms of questions in the chat, okay, so there was, I think I'll scroll to the top because I think that's fair. There's a really great question. Worldwide Funny Guy asks, how can we get clinical experience? And I think that's a very valid question because a lot of people don't know where to begin.
Yeah, I don't know what your experience is, June, but for me, it was a lot of cold emails and a lot of Google searching. And to be honest, the more you put yourself out there, the luckier you get. I mean, I remembered, this isn't necessarily for clinical experience, but it's for like a research tech position. I emailed like 50 people at the University of Pittsburgh and only one responded. And that was the one opportunity that I needed to, to get my foot in the door. So it's the same with clinical experience, you know, and also like shadowing experience for different physicians. You don't take it personally if they don't get back to you. Just keep it pushing, keep it chugging along. Your best bet is to go to, or in the hospital websites, there should, like most hospitals will have like some type of volunteer department that you can reach out to. I would, you know, email them, follow up emails, cold call them. Yeah, that's unfortunately the best advice that I have. Do you have a different strategy, June?
No, I wish. I think the other thing I wanted to add there are a lot of groups probably in colleges who focus on interfacing between students and I guess physicians at their local hospital or something like that. So they usually have a list of doctors who are open to shadowing. So sometimes you can talk with those organizations, but even those sense, like doctors are just so busy these days that it's hard to sneak a student in sometimes. I agree from a research standpoint. I essentially had like an email of like a secondary application type email, whereas like I talk about specifically the publications that they worked on or the research that they worked on and my passions, how they link to it. And I sent just a bunch of these. I don't think I went as crazy as you, Bima, and sent 50. I got lucky after like 20. But like he said, you only need one, and that just opens your doors. Because once you know one really good professional, especially someone who's willing to mentor you, they have a bajillion connections, like doctors or other PhD researchers, and they can usually try to get you in somewhere. And I think that's where having a mentor, an adult mentor in some clinical capacity is really important, because they can help do that. They can help take care of that cold calling for you too, because they have so many more resources.
Awesome. Okay, so next question is, would being a caregiver towards a relative count in some way as experience?
I would say that it depends. Yeah, I would say that it depends. It sounds like a really good experience to write in your personal statement for sure. But in terms of putting it as an official experience, I think it may depend on your level of involvement, whether you're the primary caregiver or someone that you just visit every couple months. But yeah, what are your thoughts, June?
No, I agree with you completely on that, Bima. I've had friends who were the primary caregiver of a very sick individual in their family, and that led to them delaying like their years of schooling and going into medicine, all that kind of stuff, but inspired them to be a doctor. Like Bima said, that's a great personal statement thing to add, because it was a key part of your journey. However, when it comes to clinical experiences, putting something down like that, I feel like sometimes admissions panels will look at that and think to themselves, oh, they don't really have the hours in other places, so they're trying to kind of fudge some numbers here. At least that's what my experience has been. So clinical experiences should be done in a appropriate, like I think a professional clinical setting. I think there's a lot of questions about what qualifies as a clinical experience. My general rule of thumb is it has to be some type of interaction with the patient in a clinical setting. So I think I saw someone like ask if like a receptionist worked. That I don't think I would consider as a clinical experience. I don't know if Bima, you have a different input, but because you're not actually, I know you're interacting with the patients, but because you're not interacting with them in the clinical setting in the sense of like how is care being delivered to them, how are you helping with that care, I wouldn't consider that a clinical experience. I think it's a great experience to add in your secondary application or your, or sorry, not your secondary, your primary application. But something like what I would consider clinical experience is research, because you're helping patients with the work that you produce, or like medical scribing is also one, because you're seeing the direct relationship between doctors and their patients, and you're helping patient care in that regards. Volunteering at the ED or volunteering in any clinical capacity, yeah, so things like that is what I would think. But I don't know if you had another thing to add.
Yeah, I think it depends. If it's some receptionist jobs are like strictly administrative. If so, I would think of that as less clinical. But if you're involved from like the scheduling to walking the patient to their rooms, checking vitals, giving discharge instructions, etc., I think that's going to be more involved. Yeah, there's no cookie cutter answer, unfortunately, and it all kind of depends.
Awesome. So I know we have a couple more slides before the formal Q&A. So I'll give you guys the presentation back, and then we'll continue with the questions, because there's some really awesome conversations happening.
Sweet. So yeah, I can pick up again. And I think we actually have a separate free presentation for med school interviews too, I think. Do they get access? Do they get an email of all the presentations that they can see?
So really great question. We can send out a link. People who attended obviously already have a copy, but we can send everybody a link to that med school interview webinar as well. It's not a problem. And eventually all of our webinars end up on YouTube. So we have this really awesome collection. I keep using that word, but we have a very comprehensive list of webinars on YouTube, from everything from the applications to MCAT to med school interview to what to do if you get waitlisted. So yeah, we encourage you to check that out as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they go into a lot more detail about the specific types of interviews you can be encountering. And so I'll keep this one pretty general. I think the biggest thing is knowing your application in and out. And that kind of answers to yourself on answering big questions like why medicine and why this school. So the secondary application is why this school, and the why medicine is just your personal statement. So that's where just knowing your own journey and using the personal statement, the primary application, secondary application as a self-reflection of your journey is going to really carry you forwards through the interview. I think there's a very fine balance between over rehearsal and under rehearsal. Because you don't, when you're going to get asked like why medicine a million times during your interviews, but you don't want to give such a rehearsed answer that you sound like a robot. But you should still have a general scheme, like a schematic in your mind of a guideline of what points you want to tackle, and from there you just let your voice carry you forwards. And usually that's what the admissions panel is looking for. Professionalism, that's obviously, you have to be professional. You have to dress appropriately. You always have to arrive early. You never know what type of issues can arise in traffic or anything like that. So you should always allot the appropriate amount of time. And then when you're talking with individuals, things like eye contact or listening actively to them, or you fidgeting too much, all these things kind of matter. Typical human to human interactions. So that's where practicing with other people, or sometimes even recording yourself and watching those recordings, is really helpful. Very, very uncomfortable, but very, very helpful. And then sharing stories. This is where Bima was talking about, that journal of your experiences. This is where it comes into play. You essentially do your work during your experiences, and that journal is going to tell you specific experience anecdotes to essentially answer whatever questions that the panel has. And again, the way you tie this all back to medicine is how you reflect your commitment to the field, and that all comes from having a very self-reflective story.
Nice. And I think this is might be the final slide. And yeah, so once you have your application ready to go, one, check for consistency. Like we mentioned, rely on your one cohesive story. In the extracurricular slots, don't feel pressure to fill all 15 because it's quality over quantity. I remember I was talking to a mentee, and I was reviewing his app and when we were ready to submit, and suddenly he mentioned something about like basketball, and I thought like, whoa, like where did this come, like from us like bouncing things back and forth over the 40-50 hours that we've met there. Like, he didn't mention basketball once, and so he just mentioned, oh well, I had some extra space in there, thought that I would put that in. But then it's like, no, like if you're not really that into it, or this is just like a pickup game that you did with your buddies, I wouldn't necessarily put it in. It's more of like a water cooler side conversation during your interviews that can pop up. But if it's something completely out of left field and you're just doing it just to fill the slots available, it may present itself as being a little bit disorganized or not consistent. Although I'm not, if basketball is a big part of your life, I definitely would include that. I put something like football for me. But on top of this, of telling a cohesive story, as we were discussing the job, let's say for example, the receptionist example, if you are working a full-time job at a clinical workspace, but your job isn't necessarily clinical or in the borderline, feel free to ask your supervisors to see if you can pick up more clinical responsibilities. I'm sure they would love that. And then you're killing two birds with one stone. I mean, you're going to be working there anyway. And if you're pursuing this path, might as well get the clinical experience while you're there. Proofread carefully, make sure that grammar and your spell check is on point. And like June said, seek for feedback. Don't shy away from it. As you enter through med school, you're going to be given a ton of unsolicited feedback. So it's good to be, it's good to get used to that, especially, in resident, once you move forward and become a resident. So yeah, just start seeking that feedback now and acting on it.
Awesome. Okay. So I keep using that word. I apologize, folks. And so before we move on to the Q&A, we have a very quick favor to ask of everyone on this call. We would love to hear your feedback. I saw somebody say this is such a helpful webinar. Thank you so much. We'd love to see that on our feedback form. It really allows us to take this information back, improve these sessions, provide better guidance, and also really get to know what your interests are and what kind of future webinars we can provide for you, right? We would really appreciate that. Again, no pressure, but we'd absolutely love it, and it would be incredibly helpful. With that being said, it's the Q&A period. I think we can jump right into the questions. There are quite a few. We have about 10-ish minutes left, so I don't think we'll be able to get to all of them, but we will try to get to as many as we can. Let's go to, I'll scroll up. Okay, so this is a really great question. They're all really great questions. Will my major be weighted when GPA is considered? I am majoring computer science and have had some rough semesters that are reflected in my GPA. Will my major be unique enough to outweigh a lower GPA? And how much value would be given to GPA and major respectively? I don't think we've ever gotten this question before, on a webinar at least.
Yeah, so this is actually a great question, especially because I know pre-meds come in all forms and sizes. Some do psychology, some do biology for that easier GPA, simply for that GPA purpose. But other people do engineering, and there's always a question of, hey, if I have a lower GPA in engineering, how does that compare with like a psych major or something like that? I think what Bima was saying earlier about GPA still stands in the sense that like there is a certain number that you try to target. I think I typically want at least 3.7 as well. With that being said, I have a little bit more forgiveness if you have a very academically challenging major. But if that's dropping down your GPA to like, let's say like 3.2 or 3.3, it still is a bit of a red flag for me. So I think there is some weight to it. And especially if you're performing well in an academically strong major, then that's also a great position to be in as well. But typically I do try to recommend applicants at least be around 3.6 will probably be like the near minimum for me, even for engineering. But I do have some applicants who have gone a little bit below that and they still do fine. But you might just need to tailor the schools and the diversity of schools you apply to with that into mind. And that all comes into when you're creating your application, deciding where to send out your secondaries to. Every school has a list of their average GPs and all that kind of stuff. So long story short, you do get some flexibility, but it still doesn't ignore the fact that you do need, in my mind, a bit of a cutoff of a GPA. And Bima, I don't know if you had other thoughts on that one.
Yeah, completely agree. There's a lot of smart people who have 3.2, 3.3 GPAs, and so if you're not on that boat, don't be discouraged from applying to medical school. These, even though 3.7, like those numbers 5.10 on MCAT are targets, the filter might be a little bit lower, of course, depending on different schools. Yeah, so don't let that discourage you. Just do your best and keep working hard. I will say also, just to add, that the trend of your GPA is really important too. I remembered one of my hall mates in the dorms, like during undergrad, he was like a huge partier, had like a 1.5 GPA and was almost going to get kicked out of undergrad. But then after his freshman year, he turned things around and now he's a vascular surgery resident at UCSF. So there are those stories. It takes a lot of hard work to break bad habits, but it is a little bit more forgiving during the application process if you do start off slow.
That's really impressive. That's one heck of a turnaround. So this is a really great question in terms of personal statements. Is a shorter personal statement fine? Is that something they can submit? 500 words or so is the example this person used.
I would. I think I think it goes back to the point in the sense that like you don't want your personal statement to stand out in a. I guess I'm I don't think negative is the right word, but I think the point I'm trying to make is to a certain level, your personal statement should be able to fit with other people's personal statements in the sense of if it's really short, I don't think that would be appropriate. I would still try to fill up enough of a story. But at the same time, there, Bima, maybe you have some other thoughts on this. I'm always someone who thinks that you just don't want to stand out in a bad way in terms of these personal statements. I think that's been my go-to answer. And you can add a lot of creativity, you can add a lot of things in like lengths wise, but as long as you're not standing out in a way that hurts you, I think that's the thing that's important to me. But Bima, you might have a better answer than I do.
No, yeah, I see where you're going. Sometimes a short personal statement will be stereotyped as not putting a lot of effort into it. And so I do love like a personal statement that is like succinct and gets the point across and talks to me like I'm a person and doesn't use flowery messaging or words. But I will say that a personal statement does have a set structure to it. So there's your intro, you need your thesis statement. I'm going to talk about this, this, and this. And here I go. First paragraph is going to be point 1. Second paragraph is going to be experience 2. Third paragraph is going to be experience 3. And then your conclusion, wrap it up in a bow. Remind the readers, I want to pursue medicine because this and this reason. I think if you follow that general outline, hopefully that adds more into your word count so that it's not super short. But yeah, I would err on the side of more and then trimming it down later instead of starting short and then trying to expand.
And I'd love to share that we have some resources on the website. For example, a personal statement database. So if you are feeling stuck or if you want to sort of look at what the average personal statement looks like in terms of length, we encourage you to check that out as well. So we have a couple of minutes left. So unfortunately, we will not be able to get to all the questions. There's time for about one more question. And I think this is really great. And I think it really ties into the overarching theme of tonight's webinar. What are your top 3 resources that you thought helped the most for the MCAT and med school?
For me, I am terrible at standardized testing. So I took the MCAT twice and took 2 prep courses each time. And so I've just what's it called? I've just told myself that I need to work harder than everyone else to get to where I need to be. And so that is kind of where I find peace. And so in terms of MCAT, there's so many different resources. Everyone's going to is going to have different opinions about it. I would say that I know in terms of different resources, try to rely also on your undergrad. There's a lot of like resources that I feel like people skip over that is already there and it's free and you're enrolled. And so the best resources might just be right there in front of you. And yeah, I always, when I mentor my students, I always tell them to just pursue their passions. I see, a question from Nicholas Reyes about if you're if bioengineering is your true passion, you know, instead of making it your minor, why not just make it your major? If you're doing something that you're truly passionate about, really, it's not going to feel like work. You're going to enjoy a lot more, and you're going to be able to leverage so much more out of it. So yeah, I'd say those are the three things. Sorry for the ramble, June.
No. I think you hit all the points I wanted to hit. I think the only little thing I wanted to add, I also had to take the MCAT twice. And I think part of the problem was I really underestimated how much time it would take for me to adequately cipher the MCAT. There's a million different MCAT prep courses. I think whichever one you do, and even if you decide not to do a prep course, the biggest thing is consistency and commitment. I think a lot of people will just say, hey, the average person takes like 3 months to study for it. You know, I'll just do that and, you know, I'll just pass. But you really, in those 3 months, you really have to think to yourself, hey, I'm going to sit down and focus on this rather than this is just going to be a part-time job where I'm just going to casually do some MCAT and casually do some other things. So I think when I first took the MCAT, that's kind of what I did. I have a saying that it might be inappropriate to say here, but just because of the language, but I always say it's better to full-ass one thing and commit yourself to the other thing rather than half-assing both things, because when you half-ass both things, you mess up in both things. So it's the same thing with MCAT. Just focus completely on MCAT, put everything else aside until you feel like you're in a comfortable position, and the score itself will come along with your level of commitment to it. And if you feel like you don't do very well with standardized tests, then give yourself more of a dedicated time to study for an MCAT, you know? So it's just about knowing yourself well, and whatever you decide to do, just committing yourself to it.
I think that's a perfect place to just let our audience know that the next webinar we have is on February 4th, and it's called MCAT Secrets, How to Score in the Top 1%. So if you want to join us on that one, we'd love to have you. It's on our website. You can register, and we'll be going through all the secrets, the MCAT tips, tricks, resources, everything you may need to get to that top percent. So we welcome you, and we're excited to have you. In terms of tonight's webinar, we will have to call it an end, but thank you so much for joining us this past hour. Thank you for the amazing questions. Thank you for the engagement. Bima, June, again, thank you for sharing your knowledge. You're getting lots of claps and thank yous, and again, we value your time and value all your expertise. If your question wasn't answered tonight, drop us a note. We want to hear from you. So book a consultation, send us an email, and we will try our best to get your questions answered. And yes, this will be recorded. This is recorded, and you will receive a recording. I saw that question come up. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening, and hopefully we'll see you next week.